Well, since we were last on the chat, we skied actually up at the Chill Factory on the Ski Club of Great Britain ski day, which is great. And then I guess a lot of what people were working on with the subject of today's talk, which is everyone was trying to make carved turns, as best as everyone does. So I think that's one of the aims of today. I think is to maybe bring up a few points that we all have. We all know it. We all know what we want to do when we think of carving. I guess we've all seen imagery and stuff like that. So I think quite a nice open forum and interactive sort of chat with everybody. It's quite interesting. The Ski Club of Great Britain group that I took, everyone's first hand was up saying, I want to learn to carve better. I mean, in an indoor snow dome, we're lucky enough to have them in the UK. They're obviously great. And Chill Factory is so wide that you can really, let rip on carved turns. But yeah, a few things cropped up that were very interesting during the day. So yeah, that will be a good chat for today. But I think the way it will be really nice today is to hear what people have to say, from what they've worked on, what does work, what they're still trying to work on in the carved turns.
We had a good turnout for that session in the end, didn't we, Warren?
Well, it was brilliant. It ended up being oversubscribed, but actually there was such a nice bunch of people that the group itself really, they all got on and stayed in touch actually since, and then they all worked with each other. A lot of them budded up with in pairs. A lot of them could see in each other's skiing quite a lot of the things that we were pulling out. Like where everyone wants to carve. It's obviously a kind of a prerequisite in a way for getting down big open powder fields and quite a lot of aspects of skiing. It's just there's so much to work on, and then it crossed over on the Ski Club of Great Britain day up at Chill Factory. It crossed over a lot into equipment, so we really took the equipment apart, took the skis off. I was thinking of you, Henry, on the day because I know you'd have been brilliant actually, almost be coaching with us. But it was, bending the skis, looking down the length of the skis, seeing what shape it was, and actually paying a bit of respect to the equipment first. So seeing what the equipment itself could do without much assistance, and then adding to it, because sometimes without even realizing it, you can almost be overworking something in some areas when that great bit of kit wants to get on and do its work, really.
Yeah, absolutely. I won't say a good ski carves itself because that might ruin the point of the talk this evening, but it certainly helps a long way. So that's really good. So good evening, everyone, and a very warm welcome back to the next in our series of online talks. Just a couple of quick parish notices before we go any further. As Charlotte said, and as the nice automatic voiceover lady would have let you know, this meeting is being recorded to share on YouTube later on. That does mean that the previous talks from this series and from the other series are available to watch back now, and any future ones that we do will also be uploaded as well. So if you can't make any talks further down the line, don't worry, we will have those up on our YouTube channel for you to browse in your own time. Please do make use of the chat function below to drop in any questions, any thoughts, any comments that you may have. Charlotte, Rob, Warren, myself will all be monitoring it as we go along, so we make sure that we will get your questions answered before we leave here this evening. We have another Warren Smith talk lined up in a couple of weeks' time. It's also going to be on a Thursday evening. And a date for the diary is this coming Tuesday, the 5th of August, where the ski club will be sitting down with Jazz Taylor, telemark superstar, I think it's fair to say,
Yeah.
World Cup champion, all and Peary Medal award winner from this season as well. So we're really, really looking forward to that one. A date for your diary is Tuesday, the 5th of August in the evening. Get registered on the Ski Club website at skiclub.co.uk now. So yeah, we've chatted a little bit already about the purpose of the talk this evening. We're going to dive into carving turns, and I know many of you will have been stood at the top of a picture perfect piece first thing in the morning, look down at this wonderful field of corduroy just dropping off into the horizon, and just thought to yourself, let's rip. And yeah, this is what this talk is all going to be about. So Warren, why don't you kick us off then?
Yeah, absolutely. So I know from my point of view, week in, week out in Verbier, we usually define a lot of our group levels actually, and I'm sure same with Ski Club because we're very familiar with Ski Club and how well the level system works. It is a huge chunk of the skiing general public and I sort of can include ski instructors in that as well, that are really good, sort of 70% of the way at carving, but are not completely carving from start to finish of the turn, even though sometimes they may wish to. Um, and the thing I made reference, and again, because this is being recorded for other people that perhaps can't log into the talk at this moment, I will sort of talk around it, of the fact it's going to be watched again, on replay. But there was a very interesting case study. So the Ski Club of Great Britain ski days with myself and Shemi are great, right? So you get a couple of hours, you really do get to have your video looked at, your skiing pointers worked on. It was everyone's first request actually at Chill Factory last Tuesday, to work on carving. And what was really interesting was putting it out there. What have you worked on in the past? What things were you working on? Some had already been working as instructors that morning at Chill. A lot of people were using the sort of the term fore and aft. They want to get onto the front of the ski a bit earlier in the turn because obviously it bends the ski. And one of those subjects there, I mean, it's on the front cover here if you can see it. There's Jordan from our team sort of laying out a really nice carved turn. And when you look even closer up on the screen, you can really see the ski bend there. And what we were finding up at Chill Factory was we were very lucky. It was quite a quiet day, actually. And that's what we love about skiing there in the summer. We were letting speed build up a bit and really laying out 3 or 4 turns using out the whole slope. What many people found was that there are a few factors when you look back at the video as to why carved turns were working better in one direction, like in your intuitive side or your natural side, and then in the body form, that how people were either making angles or not, it was affecting how they carved. One of the really big topics that sprung out of the day was that it was the last third or last quarter of the turn that they weren't managing to hold on to the carve, and it was either skidding out or the ski went straight or whatever it was. So it's an interesting subject to look at. We looked at a couple of points, and I'm really happy to go over them, and people got questions on them. But we were looking at creating angles in the body. We were looking at pressing on the ski a bit earlier in the turn. Once people got a bit comfortable and confident, we did start to try and think about moving forwards and backwards, like fore and aft, it's called, I guess, in ski terms. And interestingly, one of the areas that was almost underworked or not wanting to go there was actually the aft movement, the getting on the back of the ski at the end of the turn. And there was this big conversation that arose. Was, yeah, well, I'm always told not to lean back on my skis, stay in the middle or stay over the skis, which is obviously, especially from a beginner up to intermediate level, makes total sense. But interestingly, the block, because a lot of these skiers were actually really competent skiers. And what they were doing is they were making great movements into their turn, a lot of confidence, especially on one side of the body. They were making great angles, like upper and lower body separation. But they just weren't having the confidence to actually get on the tail of the ski. A bit like you imagine the brilliance of Dave Riding when he's, going for it in the slalom course. And you can really see that sort of almost like a pure squat position, trying to get the use out of the tail of the ski, the acceleration. So people didn't actually think they should be there in that place on the ski. They felt over the years of being taught and, be working through the progressions, I stay away from the tail of the ski. I stay away from going back seat on my skis. And I totally get it. It's like, yeah, it's drilled into us. I know there are certain clients I still ski with where I have to say, you are back seat. You're way too far in the back seat for the general part of your skiing. But when we sort of got our heads around it, we got people starting to really use the tail of their ski. And it was interesting for 2 reasons. One is it bent quite nicely. And then the shape of the flex of that tail part of the ski, it gave a really nice carve and an arc. And when they trusted it, they got a lovely finish to the turn. Most of them didn't achieve it in both directions, but they did find new territory that they entered when they were trying to carve up a Chill Factory by actually taking a risk and going a bit back seat, as long as they knew the way to get back into the front seat for the next turn. So we worked for a few drills, like charging the arms, like you'd see with most racers and things like that. But when they got it, it felt like a little bit of magic. It felt like, wow, whoa, I really did feel that. And my ski didn't break away and skid. Plus, it almost felt like it kicked me back when the flex rebounded into the new turn. So that was a really interesting part that I found working with the ski club members the other week. It was playing with the whole length of the ski, but paying actually a bit more attention and not shutting down this conversation about really getting onto the tail of the ski at the end of the turn. So that was really good. You know, we got some good results from it.
Awesome. And I guess that plays a little bit into a lot more of the technology that we're seeing in skis these days with having a little bit more power and stability in the rear of the ski to give you that stability to finish off your carving turn. So something like the Salomon Addict that we've tried last year and this year is a brilliant ski for that because it does have that there.
Yeah.
Um, let's talk a little bit. So let's kind of come off snow a little bit. Obviously, we are in July. Obviously we have those great facilities that we can use in your days and elsewhere. But what can we do right here, right now, to begin to think about shifting that weight backwards, but still with the ability to get it forwards? What can we do at home to help us along that
What
way a little bit?
there's an interesting exercise we did actually. We all probably look like lunatics at the top of the chill factory, but we put our skis on and we were driving our arms forward on our skis to try and generate the fore movement to get onto the tail of the ski. And as we got on it, the ski kind of whipped through. So it was creating fore and aft. And we were trying to, on a flat surface, trying to generate forward and backward movement. Now, interestingly, we said this is a great warm-up exercise anyway. You know, so I think what happened with the lifts opened at 10 o'clock. We all got there at quarter two. Vocal turned up with a big bunch of test skis, so it's quite nice because they're all sort of serviced and ready to use. And then when we looked at it, we did it up on the slope, up at the top section on the flat. But we thought to ourselves, it's not a bad warm up. You know, if you're going to go and put skis on, and you don't mind looking, you know, maybe a little bit silly, we were just charging and we were launching and lunging ourselves forward to create the movement pattern. So we were getting up on the tip and tail of the ski. Then we also did it statically. Now, in terms of at home, one of the areas that cropped up, you may have seen them on the social media that were posted, but we had to mimic some angulation movements because what we found, we even had some quite high level skiers. There was a guy there from Superfeet that came along who's like a biomechanics expert. But everyone in that group, when we went to say, right, we're going to go and make this turn, we're going to get the pressure on the ski, and then I want you to try and get your hip and rib to connect to create an angle in the legs, in the upper body to lower body, a bit like that sort of angle, you know, a bit like what you're watching Jordan do just there. Everyone did do it, and everyone didn't seem restricted. In fact, the success rate of achievement was rapid. So it took about 2 to 3 runs, and everyone found one of their turns that they really created the angle. They got the pressure on the ski, and as they were creating an angle in the body, the ski was gripping more and more. It was tilting onto the edge more, and they were riding a beautiful arc. It was brilliant to watch. What was more interesting was they weren't doing it in both directions, so it wasn't even both ways. So what we did, and this is interesting for at home, we actually sort of mimicked it. And even doing it with skis off physically didn't feel the same. So it was something as simple as sort of show you up against the wall here. You know, we were sort of making our angles here in the body. And what everyone found was, I think most people's favorite turn, I think it was to the right. So standing in this position, there was no restriction. They did two things. They increased the angle because of working on mimicking the angle off of snow. So we made this sort of really obvious question, like, do you do this often in your day-to-day life? Or is it just when you clip your skis on, come to the Chill Factory or Hemel, wherever people are skiing, and do you expect to do it? And actually, it was a really common sense conversation. Like, well, no, why would you? You know, if you watch great skiers, if we watch our British team athletes, and we see these incredible angles and movements, and you know everything we look up to and aspire to, we have to presume that if you're not doing it, like when you're going to the shops, or if you're not creating crazy angles when you're playing football, or if you're on your bike going around London, why would it just work when you ski? Because you expect it to. So by doing the off the snow exercises, we only took out about 5 minutes. It didn't really detract from our ski day. But what was really interesting was everyone found the tighter side of the body, people really actually increased it on their natural side. So they're when they clicked the skis back on, their calf turn got better. But on their other side, they realized that that wasn't going to get fixed on the day of our coaching session. So what their goal was to go home. We sort of pinpointed it to point number 5 from Ski Technique Lab. So there'll be another one of the tests that people can do at the show. But in terms of the video itself, the movement is so basic, yet we don't get to practice muscle memory. We don't get to practice how the lower lumbar of the back feels, the physiology feels, and it's really useful. So that was one of the things that came out of it, is that no one was the same left and right. Everyone had their natural side, and my God, did it show. So when they actually went off of the side, they practiced, calf turn increased. But the one part we couldn't finish in the 2 hour session was that side of the body that could really do with a lot more muscle memory, a lot more routine exercise repetition. That looked like it was going to take a couple of days, maybe 10 minutes a day for a couple of weeks. But everyone was very motivated to go back and try it. I mean, one of the guys in the group, Bjorn, I think it was, he wants to do another session, sometime in August. They all know what they need to work on from the off snow exercises, and there'll be something that Rob can chuck on the board, like the off snow routine. But it's quite common, and I'll show it in the book. It's like the exercise. I mean, it's what gets people to get in angles like this. This is Victor from our team. He's a great instructor, a level 4, making some beautiful angles like that. And you can see the same where the ski is really bent. I'm not sure how clear that comes out. But I mean, look at the leg lean angle. I mean, I probably can't do that at my age anymore. The reality of it is really simple tests here that we were showing people. Get going and doing them. So I know Rob will pop that up on the board for people to be able to use. But it's out there. And what we'd love to do is to get people interacting with it. One, going back to these indoor snow venues, because they're quiet right now. It's such a good time to train and learn to carve. But two, practice it and see how good it could get within a 3-week window. And that's our key. What we do sometimes is we measure the angle you get to with leg lean versus the upper body being upright and straight with a protractor. And that's one way you can quantify it. You do need someone to help you with that. But protractors, $10 off of Amazon, got a little digital readout, and it will help you write a little note down. I know it sounds sort of geeky, but we do it, makes a difference. And, if you want to carve, the thing about the sport of skiing, unless you're in a multi-story car park, you've got to be able to carve in both directions. And where that really shows itself is on those days where, you're about to go and ski on icy terrain. It will affect you more on your weaker turn. If you're skiing on steep slopes where you've still got to get a pretty good angle in, and carving can be more tricky there, it's the same thing. And powder snow won't forgive you. If you've got one side of the body that doesn't work, that will sort of jump up and bite you and will potentially trip you over.
And just, this is more out of curiosity than anything else. It's been 3 months since I've last been skiing, and then I can never remember what's my weaker turn, what left or right. I'm left-footed. If you give me a football or a rugby ball, I kick it with my left foot. Would that correspond to or do you find that corresponds to a stronger with my left leg as my outside leg on the outside of the turn, or would that be a reverse, or is that correlation simply not there?
No, I'm the same as you. So I was always a left-footed footballer. I sort of slapped the ball with my left foot. I stood sort of secured on my right leg, I guess, the supporting leg. But then my right hand turn is my better turn. My left hand turn is my weaker one. In terms of putting pressure on the ski, I feel personally more comfortable putting pressure on the ski through my left leg. However, you'd think that because my right leg in football was always my supporting leg, it would be good like that. So I'm not quite 100% sure on it, because the thing with that is when people come and do the talks and the tests, they don't always correlate, but because of the fact that there are sort of 5 or 6 movement axes in skiing, it could be something else, another area that lets them down. So putting pressure on it. It'd be great to see you ski. I know you're obviously a great skier, so it would be interesting to watch. But I know me personally, when I test myself or dreadingly look at my video when we're editing videos, I know and I can see that intuition when my right leg is extension is just not quite there. It's sometimes later. My left leg doesn't think, it just engages, it just presses on the ski, and I feel very confident with it. And that'll be an interesting one for anyone who, had a great season last year or the year before, has got videos of themselves skiing. It might be something interesting to look at tonight after the talk, or if you're watching this on replay, go and look back on your videos where your buddies have filmed you. Or if you haven't got one that's really clear, one of these brilliant things you can use these indoor facilities for is just go up with a friend and get their iPhone or your Android out and just be videoed. One straight run coming down the hill. It's always best to do it straight at the camera, not with mixed up angles. So if you've got that sort of front view angle and you're trying to make your best attempt at carved turns, you'll probably see it. You'll probably see one turn. And it also sometimes shows up when the inside ski lifts off the ground. So one of the other things to look out for is when you're trying to carve between left and right, usually one turn, you'll see like a slight lift of the inside ski. And I tell you this because this is my bugbear myself. When I watch videos, I'm like, yeah, damn, I lifted the inside ski. If I'm under pressure, I'll definitely lift the inside ski when I didn't want to, or when both skis in contact, and gripping for me. But that's something that can happen.
Perfect. Thank you for that. Yeah, no, just well out of curiosity. Like I said, I can never remember which way is my strong and my weaker and whether there's correlation. But yeah, thank you for that. I just want to pick up on something that you mentioned. Powder won't forgive you. And I thought that was a really interesting point because I know there's perhaps a few people here in the chat this evening that are thinking, well, we don't really carve in powder. We're not supposed to carve in powder, but obviously that I'm assuming what you're implying is that you do to a greater or lesser extent. So can you develop that a little bit
Yeah,
more about
absolutely. So
how we are supposed to carve in powder, and then when it comes to controlling that edge, what we're supposed to do with it?
yeah, absolutely. So it's a really interesting one. In fact, that got brought up the other day because one of the people in the group said, oh, I've always been told to lean back a bit in powder
Mm.
because I'm going to sink or go over my handlebars or the front of the skis. If you think about, a beautiful powder field and, you're chomping at the bit to get down it, it looks amazing. You look back up at your tracks, it's like, oh my God, wow, that's my perfect day. You had to have carved down it to be able to make those tracks. The old school way you could look at it also, you can kind of bounce your way through it, right? So you can make the short radius turns and bounce your way through it. But even when you watch an expert skier, they're still making an element of carve, even in those little bounce turns. To be stood straight up on top of the ski is also doable. You can sort of bounce your way through it and put pressure against it. When you press against it, kind of almost makes a bit of a powder wall. But to make sort of medium to longer radius turns in powder, you really do have to carve because once you're submerged, and let's compare it to I'm not carving, I'm skidding. Skidding would be almost an impossibility because you'd be trying to sideways push about 20 ton of powder out of your way. It'll trip you up. So even without realizing it, someone could almost be more encouraged to have to carve because they wouldn't get away with it. If you're skiing down a steep powder run, if you started sort of pure carving on that, you might be going at 50, 60 miles an hour really quickly. So you'd sort of be rounding your turns off. But even to that point, it still needs to have a base foundation of carving. And so usually at a skier's progression, I mean, everyone wants to get into powder usually, but they've usually worked their way through elements of skiing to get better and better between intermediate and advanced skiing, where you're sort of carving and skidding in the turn. But eventually you would need to, hold close to sort of semicircle shape that when you're trying to steer through and sort of paint your tracks in the powder.
Yeah, I think you've just described my sort of off-piste journey over the past two seasons there, going from that kind of bouncing turn to turn into much more of a carving progression. So yeah, that sounds very, very familiar with me. And one part of that that I've experienced, particularly or I've paid a lot of attention to, is balance. We've talked a lot about moving fore and aft, and of course you need to do that to drive your skis at the beginning of the turn and then stay in control at the end of the turn. But at the same time, you need to remain sort of balanced more or less in the middle of your skis. So what can we work on in that sense to keep that balance and make sure we're maybe not over exaggerating that forward or back as we go?
Absolutely. So one of the things that we always say to people is all that effort and energy you might be doing on piste where you've got to bend your ski a little bit. You've got to put pressure on the ski nice and early. In powder, we kind of get a lot of it done for us. The powder sort of shapes the lovely wall for us to ride against and through. If we go pushing like we need to on piste, to bend that ski into reverse camber and to get it to come around the turn, if we go pressing on it, we get a great result. In powder, it's not pisted, the ground isn't stable, it moves. So with the sensitivity towards how you pressure your skis, you kind of just adjust the graphic equalizers a little bit. You don't not press on the ski.
Mm.
You have to make some form of engagement, but you tread a bit more like a ballet dancer than a rugby player, you could say, in that environment. Fore and aft is reduced, so you'll still find that you're up on top of your skis and you're riding through the length of the ski as you go through it. But you definitely are correct in saying balance is so much more important because you will get thrown around a little bit. Arm posture. One of the things we saw the other day at Chill Factory was everyone who was carving, everyone in the group had experienced powder as well, but everyone that was carving wanted optimum performance. But everyone dropped their inside hand as they went through the turn. And the inside hand was almost sort of dropping down below their hip. And when we measured it on the video, there was about sort of a half a meter to a meter height difference between two hands. And it massively affected performance because every time the inside hand dropped, the pressure on the outside ski needed to be adjusted. Now, your point's quite brilliant because in powder, if you're going into the environment and your arms are moving around, those things that the arms do have an effect on the pressure control on the skis. And the individual might not be quick enough to respond to what their arms just did. And by that time in powder, it's quite unforgiving. It's too late. You've got to then adjust what your arms just did. But then by then the adjustment might be too rapid, could be too harsh. And it won't necessarily correlate. So going into powder with a really nice, you may not have your shoulders over in a position of dynamics that you would do for carving on piste. They might be slightly raised. One thing I would sort of say to people is leaning back is not really the solution. Activating your core and keeping your core in a really nice solid state so your shoulders can't be lunged forward or backward too much is a great option. And the core work is obviously the work that we encourage people to do anyway, because whatever one of the tests that we talk about at the ski show, they all kind of don't work without the core being activated. And quite often when we coach, and this is quite interesting for anyone that's out there that goes and skis with themselves or skis with buddies and actually just wants to help the buddies out. So give a few pointers, usually on an off-piste run or a run of moguls, another one that you can think of that really puts people under pressure. We sometimes say to people, activate your core, right? So get your core switched on, get it used for work. When the core's activated and you also then have to activate your core, but your brain is on what your legs are doing or stabilizing your arms or looking ahead at what you're about to get down, quite quickly the core can be forgot about. And when the core is forgot about and all of a sudden you get that wallop of pressure underneath the skis, which you will obviously get off piste, then that's what it kind of like correlates to in terms of the core being so important. We call it kind of core strength, but for skiers, it's kind of much more about core endurance because a lot of people, if you ask someone to switch their core, and they usually can, but it's switching your core on for 40 seconds of that great ski run whilst your other body limbs are moving and doing all sorts of stuff. And your brain is somewhere else because it's concentrating on your run. So core endurance, we call it. It's like having a separate brain for your core to be able to work.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I just want to put a pin in that and come back to that a little bit later if I can. We are approaching about halfway through, maybe a little bit over this talk this evening. Reminder, if you do have any questions, please do drop them in the chat. This time I'll just say, anyone have any questions they'd like to ask Warren or Rob as we're here, just before we crack on with the second part of this one? Yes, we do. Steve, you've got your hand up. Fire away.
Right. Often on a steep, icy black, I start the turn, then I'm going across the turn, and my skis start juddering like crazy, and I'm sitting right back. I'm virtually on the ground.
Yeah.
Is that I haven't got my hands high enough and forward enough when I initiate the turn? Is that right?
It can be. So what that can be, I mean, that was interesting because you sort of touched on something we spoke about on the earlier part of this chat. So it could be that your body weight got to the sort of the latter part of the turn too soon. So in terms of like breaking down the semicircle of a turn, and where your body projected itself into the new turn, it either may not have projected itself enough at the start of the turn, so that by the time of the third of the way in or halfway in, you may have already reached the sort of the tail part of the turn. You could have got there too quickly. A couple of factors can always be comparison of flex pattern between ankle, knee, and hip. Sometimes if the knee flexes out of ratio with the ankle and can overflex, it can place the hips a bit far back. Sometimes we always say whatever, which I'm sure you've done, but whatever, definitely get the ski checked, because even on an academy course when someone's renting or they own their own kit, the amount of times I've had to say to people like, wow, your edge of the ski as burrs on it, it isn't going to grip, even if you're doing the right thing. And then the other part of it could be how the pole plant was positioned for the entry of the turn. Arm posture for me is massive. So whatever happened like last Tuesday, we all had to take serious note of our arms. And what we found was arms were static. They don't have to be. You can surge them forward. You can use them to get that oomph and that start of the turn. But interestingly, from what you've just said and what my memory goes back to with clients, loads of people have done that, said that to us. We've seen it and watched it. And quite often it can be what we just spoke about with the inside hand. The inside hand in skiing is prone to dropping in. There wasn't one person on the course the other week, and if I think back, and I'm sure Rob would agree, and most of our academy team will agree, when we're coaching, so much work is done on video analysis night on the Monday, where you're looking at that upper body posture, and time again, you can see your inside hand is dropping inside the turn. It will pull you back. It will get you to the tail of the ski too quick. We are saying, definitely use the tail of the ski, but if you're in the position where you wanted to be for the last third of the turn, but you were already there halfway through or just before halfway through, that can cause that. What skis are you on?
I've got vocal GS skis. I don't think it's the skis. I think if it's a steep, icy black, often the top of a black can be steeper. And so you're starting off, there's a little bit of fear. So I'm probably sitting back too much too early. I think that's it. And when we were in Hemel, we practiced having our arms forward. And I think that made a huge difference.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I totally agree. I mean, it's also it's things we have to remind ourselves of. So, if I'm skiing on a steep black run that is icy, I definitely won't ski my best. My performance will drop by 20% probably. That happens, and unless you're in sort of like super tuned skis at like an 87-degree angle and things like that are definitely going to grip. I know there are conditions where I know my ski is about to slip. And in that condition, it changes my entry to the turn. Sometimes I do a tactical controlled skid at certain points in the turn to get through about 15 meters of what I know is bad. And there's no harm in that. There is nothing wrong in that. It's useful on steep scenarios from a safety point of view, but if you're making your perfect carved turns, sometimes we say to people, actually, it's a shame to waste the latter part that's that great snow, scrape it off a little bit. You sometimes see it in GS racing as well, but scraping off a bit where it's an impossibility is an idea. But definitely, if you're going back to that scenario, get videoed, because we'd love to see it, but we can also kind of help you coach yourself on the video, if that makes sense. And more than likely it will be. Do you notice that it's one turn direction or is it both?
Can't really remember.
Okay. That would be my next point to go to. So in terms of the subject we're talking about, it's a very, very common subject. You're not the only person that feels that. And in fact, it's great that you brought the comment up, because it's a really common thing visually that we see. But it would be interesting to see if it's both turns or one turn. And that would be almost my first port of call for discovery, that when you get the chance to go back. Was Hemel icy that day, or was this in the Alps that we were talking about?
Oh, I'm talking about in the Alps on a steep
Yeah.
black. In Hemel, we concentrated really on the arms high and forward,
Yeah.
which I've never done before. I haven't done that on a proper slope yet, just in
Okay.
Hemel.
No, I know this. Shemi was doing some great exercises with some of the guys I was skiing with the rainbow, the idea and getting that driven forward. And also, if you look at success of ski racers, optimized skiing, like performance skiing, so much work is done there. Even when we were talking about fore and aft earlier, a lot of our results were achieved by driving the arms. And we found that arms were too low in general. and they were static to the point that they were not enhancing the initiation of the turn.
Brilliant. That's thank you for that, Steve. Any more whilst we are here? Fabulous. In which case, I will move on. And actually, Steve, you've kind of just asked my next question for me. I was going to talk about, we've talked a little bit about the end of the turn and then the middle of the turn, and we're sort of working our way forward along the ski as we go. So, could we talk a little bit about turn initiation in this case? What are perhaps some common faults that you see with the turn initiation that meant that uh, people wouldn't then carve properly, and what can we do about that as we go?
I think a big part of that, again, what I watched the other week, is being progressive with your movements. Sometimes because the changeover and the crossover can be the intimidating part of the turn, ending one turn and literally throwing your body, or however you want to sort of describe that, over towards the new turn direction, it can be slightly intimidating. And if it's intimidating, it can be sometimes rushed. And if it's rushed, it doesn't give the skier a chance to feel that lovely sort of shovel of the ski, pick up the turn. Because there's a certain bit of action that takes place where a lot of the work can be done for you when the shovel wants to engage. And when it starts to make that first part of the movement, it's a great feeling when it's picked up your turn. But people can sometimes miss that point. So we talk about projection lines when someone's coming from the end of one turn and where they aim their body to get onto the new turn. Obviously starting off with your leg extension and changing your flex extension pattern gets your hips to start to travel across there. But the key to it is being progressive. And that can sometimes be rushed. If it's rushed, you missed the sweet spot.
Perfect, thank you. And we've just had a comment in actually from Bridget, who asks, it seems to be easier for men to carve due to their dynamic than for women. Is that something that you've experienced before in your teaching at all?
Do you know what? I haven't thought about it like that. I don't know. Women are fantastic skiers. In fact, that word I've just spoke about progressive movements, I've seen some really high skillful patterns of movement from women, but weirdly, I don't define it to do with sex. Actually, I sort of look at it as a general, of a person, of a skier. In terms of what's that comment there? Due to where your hips are. Yeah, so Bridget's got a really good point. The center of mass is different between men and women. In terms of that, as Henry, there have been brilliant advancements over the years of how boot manufacturers, ski manufacturers have regarded the difference between men and women and their center balance point. But projecting and getting, the movement across the hips, I don't sort of see it as something that I visually noticed a difference on. There are great exercises for this. And in terms of what you're saying there, Bridget, so it's harder to pull your knees out to make up the carve. Yeah, sometimes that can be the case, actually. It's a really good point. Sometimes in what we witness, female skiers can be more prone to A-frames, sometimes. What we do at that stage, because of the nature of the hips and the way the angle goes down the leg and gets to the boot, that's where we put extra attention into how the importance of ski boot fitting is, how important of footbeds are, how important of alignment is, and great advice from the technician. So I understand what you mean, but I think as well, with the point you make, that there are definitely ways in which there are workaround exercises. And what we've seen quite a lot of positivity is where people have worked through things like the lateral control exercises, where you're switching on your adductors, abductors to try to control the lateral movement. People that have tried that and tested it for about 3 weeks have come out the other side without an A-frame, without a ski lesson to do with an A-frame. So there's some really interesting stability exercises for it. And in terms of what you say, Bridget's absolutely right. If there's an A-frame in a skier, it will block the natural trajectory of projection across the skis. And there is the obvious thing that if there is a slight A-frame, the skis are at different angles. And if someone just suddenly tied a bit of rope around my knees and made my knees slightly closer together than my hips and my feet, I guarantee you, I would not want to just hurl my hips into the new turn direction. I would be cautious. I wouldn't feel comfortable doing it. There'll be some form of intuition, what you feel that you're thinking this don't feel right. My skis are at a slightly different angle. A ski could get caught. So Bridget's point's really good. There are a lot of exercises. You can put bands around the knees. You can create awareness. But for anyone out there to pick up on what Bridget's point is, another reason to go and get your buddies to video your skiing. I've seen a video of your skiing, Bridget. She's a fantastic skier. I think we watched a video at the Ski Club of Great Britain end of season party. Your levels are very high. I'd sort of place you between a level 2, level 3 ski instructor. So your skiing level, you didn't look like a skier that suffered, but what the point you've raised is actually very valid. And yeah, there are people out there that definitely need extra work and attention in the symmetry of the legs, but it's a thing that does block the projection into a new turn and turn initiation. Okay, put my glasses on. Here we go. Let's have a look.
Perfect. And then Glennis has actually joined in that discussion with the question, with respect to male versus female, I was once advised to set my bindings 1 centimeter back beyond usual for all mountain skis. I wonder if that might be relevant more generally.
I think they do. I mean, I think freeride skis, a lot of people definitely don't want to be in the center of the ski. They might go back a little bit. I think the manufacturers themselves have kind of figured it out, with the science and the ski testing. They've figured out the perfect center point of a binding for that freeride ski. And it's usually a little bit further back than what a race or a GS ski might be. But yeah, in terms of the male versus female, that's one of the points I made earlier. There are slight adjustments and tweaks and differences. I know, Henry, you've got quite a big knowledge on this from all the ski work that you've done.
Yeah, you do make a very good point about manufacturers' recommended settings, and in general, there is very, very little reason to go away from the manufacturer's recommended settings. It would be more than anything else if you want to use a ski for something other than its intended purpose. That's when it comes in. So you have a more downhill orientated ski that you want to be more powder or freestyle orientated with, you'd shift it more towards a center mount, and vice versa, really. But there's very little reason to go away from a manufacturer's recommendation. I can perhaps see that, Glennis, if it was a wider pair of all mountain skis, that might make a little bit of sense, just tracking from what I was saying there. But generally, unless you have a really, really, really good reason to, it's just stick with the manufacturer's recommended setting on pretty much all skis these days. There's a couple I can think of, the Atomic Maven Maverick Backland range, where they are recommended to be more central. So that's probably the only pair off the top of my head where I'd say consider dropping back maybe a centimeter, but generally stick with the manufacturer's recommendations.
Yeah, I'd have to say exactly the same as Henry on that. I kind of trust them way more than I trust myself in terms of a judgment, because they've just spent all their time testing the ski, weighing the ski, seeing the ski made in the factory, everything that's been, all the science behind it, they definitely know. And obviously all their skis are tested by men and women. So
yeah. And more skis are becoming unisex, particularly at the all mountain freeride range. But at the same time, the way the smaller skis in that range will be more better tuned for lighter skiers. So whilst they are unisex, you may find that some would fit a more sort of stereotypical, let's put it in air quotes, female physiology, whereas the bigger skis in that range would suit a more powerful, again, generalizations, more powerful male physiology. But generally, yes, unless you are using a ski not for its intended purpose, stick to the manufacturer's recommendations. And just to comment on something you said earlier, we mentioned in the last talk we did the importance of getting a good boot fit. And we stressed that again, making sure you're in the right pair of boots. They're like Harry Potter wands. You don't choose the wand, you don't choose the boot. It's the boot and the wand that choose you. So trying on a few pairs, playing around with them, making sure you're getting the right fit. and going from there. And just to follow on from that point, Warren, is there anything that you'd look out for, either if you're skiing yourself or looking at someone else skiing, where you can kind of straight away see that maybe they are in the wrong equipment, it's not set up properly, the boots aren't fitting correctly? Anything sort of from a technique point of view that you look out for, either for yourself or on others?
Yeah, I mean, Henry, it kind of overrides the talk itself, right? So if the boot is not set up exactly, and Henry's right, you know, you don't sort of choose it necessarily by brand, you get it because it's the right one that fits you. Everything to do with that. Quite a lot of answers actually over even what Bridget's writing here about knees close together than the feet, A-frame, whatever we call it. We've seen so many solutions for this in the boot setup phase, whether it's to do with the footbed, whether it's to do with the angle of the cuff and all sorts of different modifications that can be made. In terms of boot checking and equipment checking, we need to know for carving that someone can dominate their ski boot. I mean, that's a really big thing for me. So there's clamping your ski boot up, putting your ski boot on, doing it up, fastening it. It looks good. That's probably the most important thing. Let's face it. Yeah, I'm joking. But when the boot's on you and you're in, you've got to know that you have complete domination over that ski boot's flexed mechanism. If you don't, one is you're going to be on the tail of the skis more for most of the time in the turn. Two is skiing is not just actions. So we're not just swinging a golf club here. Skiing is 50% actions, but it's also 50% reactions in the phase of the unknown that we come across. Reactions that you've got to be able to either absorb, push back at, play around with. But to get fore and aft on skis, to create angles, we know we've got to be able to have domination. And one of the strongest things I could say to anybody listening to this talk is just put your ski boots on in the middle of the summer and start flexing them and start watching a TV series, flexing your ski boot one leg at a time. Again, sounds ridiculous, but it usually just takes place in the average skier. And none of us want to be average. We want to be great and we want to enjoy the sport. But wear your boots, flex them. It might be that if you did it between now and the next talk, 4 questions from 4 different people could crop up and say, do you know what? I flexed my boot and I'm getting this weird reaction, or I'm not quite getting to the full flex range that I think I should be. Is there anything we can do? And there are actually loads of things you can do. And we're very lucky in the UK. We have some of the best boot fitters in the world. There's no doubt about it. And you also have such great sort of port of call for MOTs. Go and get your boot checked, get someone to put eyes on your boot. That's all I know from the British ski industry, is that it's a really good place to pop in, have a coffee, chat ski, watch a video up on the screen, but get someone to check your boots if you're not sure. But get them on now, wear them, flex them, make sure that you can dominate, because all this other stuff we talk about tonight, about the technical element of pressing on a ski and getting onto the nose, projecting your hip, trying to have symmetry in your legs. If your boot isn't functioning and flexing comfortably for you, none of that will work the same. You won't be absorbed to it. There'll be a block against it working for you. You might get 20% or 30% of what your ski coach told you to do, but you can't do it all. So that's why we urge people. Sometimes a ski boot is fitted perfectly by the best boot fitter in the world, and he got it absolutely right. But the person never exercised the muscle memory of what was required to make the functioning of the boot work. So there's a few different pointers to that. Sometimes you might need a tweak. You might need to change the angle of the footbed to get the optimum flex, but you've got to dominate a ski boot if you want to do the sport well.
Thank you for that, Warren. I just want to pick up on something that Bridget has popped in the chat. So what about a slalom ski versus GS or freeride ski in terms of carving technique? I'll answer that one very, very quickly, and then I'll come to you, Warren. So, it's all the same. You just got to work a bit harder. And what I would say on that one is you won't necessarily be able to carve as well as you can, simply because you won't have particularly that tail support that we were talking about in the beginning of the video. But what we are seeing more and more these days, and what's really, really fun and exciting about freeride skis, is that you are getting a lot of World Cup piste technology is now being put in freeride skis. So you're getting 96, 99, 100 mil underfoot skis that you can carve and short turn on just like you can with a 68, 70, 75 mil underfoot. So there's some really exciting stuff coming along, which means that you don't have to work quite as hard as you would on a traditional big beefy free ride ski. And yeah, Bridget, I'm as excited as you are about that. There's some brilliant stuff out there. Just to kind of begin to move things to their close, Warren. So we've sort of worked our way along the length of the ski, and we've worked our way through the through sort of various bits of the turn. I wondered if over the last sort of 5 minutes or so, can you describe to us what it looks like and feels like to carve like a pro? Can you work through a turn for us and
Yeah.
just pick up on some of the bits that we've discussed and some of the feelings that we've talked about throughout, and just talk about what it should look like and what it would feel like, so we can go away with that in our minds, work on some stuff over this summer, and then come into this winter ready to go, ready to, as it says, carve like a pro.
Yeah, I mean, I would think about it from a point of view of flow. Everything's got a flow and move in synchronization to each part of the turn. You've got the start, the middle, and the end of the turn, but actually that blends into one movement pattern. You're moving over your skis, you're making angles in the body. Sometimes just to get that thing going, you just gently tilt your skis onto the edge and feel what the ski does. And if you've got a lovely open space and a bit of momentum going, you'll slowly and progressively build up the carve. The sensation of the carve is actually getting the skis on their edges and feeling like a razor sensation of them cutting across the hill. It's a beautiful thing to play around with, and all the forces that get generated are quite exhilarating. That the key really is obviously to get the semicircle of a turn meeting a semicircle. Look at your turn shape. Sometimes track back and see what you're doing. But the most important thing is make your movements progressive. You need to expand on your movements quite often after this talk. I said Rob will be throwing a few things in there that you can use for ranges of movement and getting used to the movement patterns. But once you've expanded the movement ranges, which you can do off of snow, be progressive, let it flow, feel it. Don't just look at the mechanics and the start stop and all this stuff. Really feel the sensation of a carved turn. It might be to get started, you only do one direction at a time just to get the sensation, and you start linking them afterwards. But that's what I would say. It's a lot about flow.
Brilliant. Thank you for that, Warren. And one more question in the chat from Elizabeth. Is there anyone you'd recommend in Scotland for boot fitting? She needs new boots for this season. And I've just said back the Craig Don shops, they've got them in Edinburgh, Perth, Inverness, and Aberdeen, I believe, as well as Addisbrigham and Braehead. Any more thoughts on that one, Warren?
Yeah, I'd agree. I mean, we know the people in those shops, the Craigden guys we work with very closely. They're massively passionate about skiing. So I would definitely have a look. If you give us a pinpoint to the exact location, we can probably point you in the direction of the exact shop. Certainly Edinburgh, Aberdeen, Perth. We do know the people inside the stores, and Inverness as well. I think we're starting our tour off in Inverness actually when we kick off the Ski Technique Lab tour on the 1st of October. So we'll be in that Craigden store.
There we go. Thank you for that, Warren. Any more questions before we...
Yeah, I have one more.
Yes, Steve, thank you. Go ahead.
Warren, at Hemel, you mentioned the angle of the boot, and of course, when I got home, I forgot to check my boot, but it was something like 120 or 130 degrees. I can't remember. I can't remember what you recommended.
Most boots are going to be the same. Most boots are going to have a slightly forward angle on them. Let me just grab it. Can I just show you what the angle? Well, actually, I don't need to show you. I can show you in an image. I've got my ski boots here because I skied the other day. But most boots that you see in a shop are going to have a forward angle like so. Okay, so depending on the degrees of change, there are different types of boots of angles that are going to cover different types of skiing, but there's not that much difference. They're all very close to being the same. Henry, I don't know what your thoughts are on that for what you saw at the ski test this year, but it's all roughly the same angle.
It's all broadly the same. Yeah, absolutely. The one difference, Steve, you mentioned before you've got GS skis, so I'm not sure whether this will apply to you, but the one difference is if you have hybrid boots or touring boots, so anything that is designed to go in a pin binding, they will be far more upright than a standard downhill alpine boot. But generally, and the same thing if it's designed for comfort more than anything else. And that'll tend to be your very high volume, your very soft flexing boots. They'll tend to be a little bit more upright. But as a rule of thumb, yeah, they'll all be the same. Any good quality, good standard alpine downhill boot will be very, very similar, if not the same.
Cool.
Fabulous. Well, there we go. If there's nothing else, then I think we will wrap it all up
And that,
there.
just one question.
Oh, hello, yes.
Hello, I'm going to speak now because I can't type quick enough. So you mentioned pin bindings. What about pin and pin boots? So what about carving in those? Seeing as you said the angle's different, does that make any difference?
Yes.
The-
Warren,
the-
do you want to go?
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, I got a pair of skis with pins on, pair of katanas, pin boots. I ski in a cabrio boot all the time. I did the course the other week in a cabrio pin boot. I happened to be on a pair of race skis on the day. But you can still carve on the skis. You know, the binding in theory doesn't make a huge amount of difference. The only thing I might say is, you know, sometimes be slightly more cautious than hooning around at 60 miles an hour on a conventional binding, and what you might not do exactly the same. Not on all the pin bindings, just on some. But you can certainly carve on a ski with a pin binding and pin boots. But like I say, my boots are free ride boots, cabrio, and ski on them all the time. Don't even get back in my race boots at the moment. I'm just doing the whole thing on them. They work great.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I add my thoughts here. I've shifted across to pin touring boots and pin bindings this year, and I've noticed that I've all of a sudden I'm back on my heels and I'm stood up, which has undone all of the hard work that Warren and Shemi have done over the past couple of years. So it's like what I said about free ride skis. It's you just need to work that a little bit harder to get back into the flow of things. And then once you're there, you're there. So if you are moving across to a pin binding, to a pin setup, you will be a little bit more upright, a little bit more on your back heels than you would have been previously. So again, it's just working to pull yourself back forward and getting back in your flow again where you were previously. At least that's been my experience.
Yeah, it makes sense.
And once again, a reminder that we do have that Jazz Taylor talk on Tuesday, the 5th of August in the evening, if you'd like to join us for that one as well. That one should be very, very good fun. Otherwise, thank you very much for joining us this evening. This talk has been hosted by the Ski Club of Great Britain, along with Warren Smith. Thank you for taking the time to join us, and we hope to see you again at one of these very, very soon. Thank you and goodbye.